Lady Louise, daughter, and eldest child of Prince Edward and Sophie Wessex, joined her 14-year-old brother James, who was the youngest to attend the vigil, to say goodbye to their grandmother. The two teenagers were dressed in black formal dress as they stood during the service in Westminster Hall, where the late monarch will lie in state until 6:30 a.m. on Monday, with their heads bowed low. Their grieving mother, Sophie, Countess of Wessex, could be seen in tears as she watched her young children pay tribute to their late grandmother from a platform facing the coffin with her husband Prince Edward. The young royals, led by William, were in position at the top of the Grand Committee staircase in the corner of the vast hall at 5:58 p.m. for the poignant vigil. At 6 p.m., the tapping which signifies the changing of the guard sounded and William began walking down the steps, one at a time, followed by Harry, then Beatrice and Eugenie side by side, Louise and James side by side, and Zara and Peter also side by side. Lady Louise and her brother attend a vigil for their grandmother. Image, Sky News. The siblings paid tribute to their late grandmother at the 15-minute service. Image, Getty. Silence fell as members of the public looked on, with the only sound being the grandchildren's footsteps on the stone. Both Lady Louise and James looked emotional as they bowed their heads. The two brothers, dressed in military uniforms, stood at the foot and head of the Queen's casket throughout the 15-minute service. Read more. Harry fulfills Charles' wish and wears uniform during emotional vigil. James bowed his head as he stood by his grandmother's coffin. Image, Getty. The Queen's passing brings uncertain future for royal family. Comment: thanks to her constancy and unflappable solidity, the Queen rightly earned respect for the strength and stability she gifted the country. Little wonder, in these dreary days of heartsick national mourning, we're left to wonder what happens now? Click here for Angela Epstein's musings on the future of the royal family. Zara Tindall and Peter Phillips stood on either side of the Prince of Wales, while Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie were positioned on either side of Prince Harry. Lady Louise and James Viscount Severn stood at the middle of the coffin, opposite one another. Members of the public continued to file past while the Queen's grandchildren stood guard, with some women wiping tears away from their face as they left the hall. Don't miss Sophie Wessex in tears watching brave Louise and James stand vigil. Video: Queen's Vigil, royals opt for headbands over hats for key reason, revealed. Prince William leads Queen's grandchildren in silent moment. Pictures: Lady Louise looked somber as she made her way for the 15-minute vigil. Image, Getty. At 6:15 p.m., the tapping sounded and the grandchildren ended their vigil. William led the group away from the coffin, followed by Zara and Peter, Louise and James, Beatrice and Eugenie, and finally Harry. Lady Louise and James' parents, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, earlier met well-wishers outside Buckingham Palace. Edward told the crowd, "I know that my mother would really appreciate this fantastic support." Well-wishers could be heard telling Edward and Sophie sorry for your loss outside the Queen's residence. Lady Louise paid her respects to her late grandmother. Image, Getty. It comes after the Queen's children, King Charles, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Prince Andrew, held a separate vigil around her coffin on Friday night. The four royals stood at each corner of the Queen's coffin where it is currently lying in state at Westminster Hall,